Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined by my good friend, Jacob Gibbs. It's always a lot of fun when Jacob Gibbs comes onto the Dynasty show, and today will be no exception. Jacob, you get a different location. We're a couple of minutes behind. I appreciate you fighting through the internet problems to be here today.
Yeah, we're just rolling with it. And yeah, good friend, man. That is refreshing. That feels good. Me and Heath have now officially met in real life. And some were mistaken, thought that I was his son. They saw pictures
Someone
of
did
us.
say that.
They saw a
Correct.
picture of us, and Heath is like 8 inches taller than me or something. But yeah, my Wi-Fi has been out for 6 days. Shout out Google Fiber. Incredible work on their end. Still not up and running. So I'm at my friend's house. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm literally holding my mic in my hand. So we're going to try to make this as quick as we can because I'm not that strong.
So yeah, he's not. Jacob's going to keep that mic as close to his mouth as he can because every time he moves it, it's like he went into a different room and is talking to us from there. But these are the links we go to bring you FFT Dynasty, and I've got 3 topics that I really want to get into today. So the main point of the show, if you will, we will be talking about a tight end premium startup draft, not a mock, a live draft, maybe the slowest live draft I've ever been a part of that we are currently in right now. We're 6 rounds deep, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Before that, I wanted to talk about some of Jacob's takeaways from preseason week 1, what they mean for Dynasty. But before that, I'm kind of springing a conversation on Jacob because of discussion that's gone on Twitter over the last couple of days, over the last couple of years, that I just think that it would help if we could get some clarification, set some parameters for what we mean when we talk about upside. It is a common amongst the smartest people on fantasy football Twitter. It is a common refrain that nothing really matters besides upside. And I've said this in one quarterback leagues for quarterbacks for a long time because replacements, it's so easy to find replacements. That's not what everyone's saying when they say nothing matters but upside. They're basically saying that slightly above average players don't really help you. You need outliers, you need league winners, you need upside. Jacob, I'm going to give you the most difficult question you've ever had on this show. How do we define what a player's upside is?
Yeah, this is a nuanced conversation for sure. I think the first thing to bring up, and this is important because we are on a dynasty show here, but it's related to dynasty as well as redraft. But typically, when I hear that all that matters is upside, I think that conversation is mostly about season-long managed leagues, where you brought up the quarterback position. You're able to work the waiver wire, and you can do that to the other positions, maybe not to the same extent, because the relative differences in depth and the number of starters you have at each position. But with these managed leagues, the idea is you can take more swings on big upside players because you do have the availability to, throughout the year, make trades, make free agent acquisitions, work the bottom of your bench, and try to come up with more answers if your high upside, high risk shots don't work. So I would start there, that it is important to differentiate between like what format we're talking about when it comes to upside.
Very well said, and I think important. And also, you didn't answer the question at all.
Yeah.
Jacob is also a politician, and Joe asks another important question: have you been quilting? Is a beautiful quilt behind you on the bed. If you're watching on YouTube, you certainly should be. I want to. So, that being said, because it is, you're right. It's certainly more of a redraft conversation, but it does get talked about in terms of dynasty as well. Upside certainly does. And long-term upside is upside strictly related to a player's situation, their talent, their opportunity. What are the main factors for you? And I say this as somebody, and we both have gone through the projections process this year, projecting kind of more of a median outcome. Like what do we think the median projection for this player? From where I stand, a median projection seems a little more objective, whereas an upside discussion seems a little more subjective. Do you think that's accurate?
I do, but I think there can be some objectivity in creating a range of outcomes in your projections, and that starts with the baseline team level stuff. Like, what are we getting from Vegas? How many points is this team projected for over the course of the year? How many wins are they projected for? And then historically, when you look at other teams that have been within that range, what type of, top like 90th percentile outcomes, what have those looked like? And so that for me, I've only recently in the last year or two started trying to truly build out and test like the range of outcomes for each player and for
Right.
each team. And so I don't know how confident I feel in my process yet, but I think it is attainable that is something that we can do, is like, rather than just being like, this player is athletic, this player, this offense will score a lot of points. There's generalizations that we can make that seem like they correlate to upside, like a team creating a lot of offensive plays, a team scoring a lot of offensive points, a player being able to take on a large workload, a large target share, or just a player being an outlier type of talent, like a Devon Achane or someone like that, Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of generalizations we can make, but I think, yeah, ultimately, I would and you would like to make it as objective as we can. And so I do think there is merit in the practice of like trying to actually map out a range of outcomes. Could this team actually have 30 plus passing touchdowns? And if that's not the case, then maybe Malik Neighbors doesn't have the type of ultimate upside that is available to a lot of other receivers and better offenses. Maybe the same could be said about Chris Olave or whatever. Like last year, I think we saw basically about the peak level of efficiency for the Saints offense in a lot of ways.
Right.
We've dug into that when we talk about projections. Can it get much better than that? So yeah, that's why I started with there's so many ways to take this conversation. That's why I started with it's relevant to the format that you're playing, and then beyond that, I think you do start at the team level, but there's also a lot of interesting like player specific stuff that we could dig into as well.
And I think that's the part where like I get lost, because I look back at last year and that outliers make all the difference argument is evident in last year's standings. Like it made a lot more difference if you picked up Kyron Williams off the waiver wire, or if you happened to draft Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane late, or if you were a Puka Nacua guy like you were, than if you hit value in round 5, 6, and 7. But what in the world do Kyron Williams, Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and Puka Nacua have in common? Like they play for the Dolphins and the Rams, like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan offenses.
Yeah, so I think there's two things that come to mind for me that they have in common, and one you hit on is good offenses. The second is ambiguity in their offense in terms of where the ball is going to go. At the running back position for Miami last year, we didn't really know. It felt like it was Mostert and Jeff Wilson, but then Wilson had the injury. And then with the Rams, that one was a little bit more unforeseen. It felt like it was Cam Akers, but at the same time, McVay had kind of given a signal for a while that he didn't necessarily want Cam Akers to be the guy.
Right.
Cooper Kupp had the injury. So I think in both those situations, I think ambiguity with where the targets are going to go, where the red zone work might go, is definitely an important piece here when you're searching for upside.
And then I'd say that, like, the two guys at tight end that were the second half of the season league winners were Trey McBride, who needed a major injury, and Evan Ingram, who had maybe been the most boring player in fantasy football for the last 4 seasons before Christian Kirk got hurt. Like a lot of those outlier performances do at least seem somewhat attached to who gets hurt. Now, who can take advantage if that happens, I think is a worthwhile discussion. And I think it's definitely something you should consider when you're looking at the end of your bench in Dynasty. In a 14-team league, I was able to pick up Jahmyr White like week 9 or week 10 last year. I don't want to have boring wide receivers on my bench, particularly if I'm not competing. I want to have guys who might benefit if someone else gets hurt. And that's a way that's upside that's not really even related to the talent of the player or the offense, just the potential opportunity.
Contingency upside.
Yeah, contingent upside.
You'll hear that phrase used a lot. And I do think that is important. Like the most recent example I've used to depict this is like, consider Jalen Waddle compared to Garrett Wilson. And I'm not saying the Waddle is necessarily a better pick, but if Tyreek Hill were to get hurt, Waddle would take on such a larger role than he is currently projected for. Whereas Garrett Wilson, he's already at the top of his. I mean, we're projecting him for a 30% target share. Could it really get any higher? Like, what injury in his offense would like make Wilson's role elevate even further? I guess Breece Hall, but really, I don't think it would make that much of a difference. So contingency upside is important as well, and that's something to think about. And especially with good offenses, that's something to think about. I had another point I wanted to bring up, but I can't remember what it was.
That's okay. We're going to get one more question before our first break, and it has to do with one part of what spurred this. Jahmyr Gibbs, scary times on Twitter last night. Like we had ACL talk, and then all of a sudden it's a hamstring, and that's maybe still not good since he had a soft tissue injury that kept him out for a month and a half this summer, and he had a hamstring injury that cost him 2 weeks last year. Are you doing anything differently at all in Dynasty because of this Jahmyr Gibbs injury? Is it time to see if maybe we could sell David Montgomery on a high real quick because Gibbs will probably be fine? Are you downgrading Gibbs at all in your mind in terms of Dynasty?
I'm glad you brought up Jahmyr Gibbs because it did make me remember what I wanted to bring up, my final point on upside. But to answer your question, no, it doesn't really change anything. I think you could sell Montgomery, especially if Gibbs misses time. Montgomery comes out and scores a bunch in the first few weeks. Montgomery is actually somebody I've been targeting a lot because he's really not that old. And I think that the team really loves him. And he's probably going to be in that offense for a little bit. And he just fits the identity of what Dan Campbell wants to do. And nobody wants him really for Dynasty because for Dynasty people, he is old. He's dead. Like once you get that age, you run it back. So the last point I wanted to bring up related to upside is specific to the running back position. And that's why Gibbs made me think of it. And Tyrone Tracy, my guy, got hurt today, makes me think of it as well. And that's that targets are crucial for running back upside specifically. And so there are a lot of player specific things you can dig into at each position. Athleticism and touchdowns at the tight end position are really important for upside. Targets have been correlated really strongly to the ultimate running back upside. Jahmyr White is somebody you brought up. I have a hard time seeing Jahmyr White finishing as like a top 10 or 12 running back. And really what I'm looking for when I talk about like running back upside is like a top 5, like 250, 300 plus PPR point type of guy. And I do a study on this every offseason and refresh the information, but it's the target threshold that I found is 80, and that changes a little bit with 17 games. But if you can get a running back to like 70, 80 plus targets, that's kind of necessary to get into that massive, like 300 plus point upside range.
That's interesting because like if you look at 3 of the top 4 last year, and this was kind of one of the guys I was arguing on Twitter with people about this morning. It was Jahmyr Gibbs versus Kyren Williams and who has more upside. Well, Kyren was not, he had 32 catches in 12 games, probably a 60 target pace, if I'm roughly guessing, not looking at how many targets he actually had, but cleared Jahmyr Gibbs by 5 fantasy points per game last year. And the only reason Gibbs was that close was because he averaged 29 points per game in the 2 games David Montgomery didn't play. But it does seem to be that because of that target volume, it's just, I think it's looked as, and you can tell me whether you feel this way or not. What Kyren Williams did last year is not actually his reasonable upside, and Jahmyr Gibbs has higher upside than that.
I do feel that way. I think that the Detroit offense is an absolute like fantasy print shop. They're going to create a ton of plays, a ton of targets, and there's touchdown upside as well. It wouldn't surprise me if Gibbs has more touchdowns than Kyren, which seems crazy with David Montgomery there. But I mean, Kyren had 15 touchdowns in 12 games last year, and that just really, really inflates things. I think he did run a little bit hot there. But I mean, if Kyren's in that role again, where he's like 90% of the snaps, all the red zone work, that's the type of profile, the Derrick Henry kind of guy who can get there even without the massive targets. And Kyren still saw 4 targets per game, which isn't nothing. But it's mostly you need targets at the running back position. Occasionally you can get there just through massive touchdowns, like, Raheem Mostert last year, obviously.
Right. Or insane efficiency, like the guy who's right behind him, Devon Achane. But let's take our first break. Let's jump into preseason week 1 and what mattered to Jacob Gibbs.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sport into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
So I want to start with something specific, and then this is going to get really open-ended, which I know is kind of the way that you prefer it. But we have to start with, why do you hate Bo Nix?
I know.
I see people on Twitter going over the film and saying, man, things could not have gone much better for Bo Nix. And I see people, you and Dan in particular, going over the film and saying, I don't understand why anybody thinks it was a good thing for Bo Nix. This matters for Superflex dynasty managers for sure. Like, can this guy be elevated by Sean Payton? We thought they were a good fit. You look just at box score scouting, seems like a pretty good start. Why do you hate him?
I don't hate him. I feel like this has gotten way out of hand. But it's more of a real life take than a fantasy take, which is still pertinent for dynasty managers for sure. I think he showed the same type of rushing that he did in college, and that's exciting for fantasy, particularly this year. But at the same time, Nix has to get on the field and he has to be able to operate a functional offense. And what I saw in the first game, and this is, not, I'm no scout, but I am pretty plugged into, I think, really good quarterback resources, because quarterback is the hardest position for me to evaluate statistically. The QB school, JT O'Sullivan, Derek Klassen, QB class on Twitter, my guy Dan Schneier, I'll throw his name in there as well. Incredible film analysis from all those people. And they saw what I kind of saw, which is that he was making life way harder than it needed to be. It's week 1 of the preseason. It's his first NFL action ever. So it's possible that we just move on from this and it's fine. But I also do think he kind of did show a little bit of this at the collegiate level as well. I just when I watched him, I was like, these things are what kill drives, and like, he's got the Sean Payton offense, like, allows for such easy, like, continuity and rhythm and, like, building and layering of the drives. And he almost seems like antithetical to that in the way that he's playing. I don't want to overreact to it because, like, he does have talent, man. When he has his feet set, like, he is throwing a freaking tightrope accurate ball. But, like, a lot of the decision making is strange to me. And it's weird because, like, he's often doing too much, like I said, but at the same time, I see him turn down deep balls where it's just like he has the throw and he chooses to check down, which is what we saw at Oregon all the time as well. So yeah, I don't know. It was just a kind of frustrating game to watch. And it's possible that I have some bias or something because I was a little bit hesitant about him coming in.
Right.
So, like, I'm not rushing to get into judgment on that. I didn't mean for it to be the end of the world here for Bo Nix. I think from a fantasy standpoint, if he can clean some of this stuff up, just settle in and find a rhythm, like, could be totally fine.
So I'm looking at my rankings and I just wonder, like, you're a team heading into a rebuild that somehow still has one of these, I don't know if they have more than 1 year left type starters, the Rodgers, the Stafford, you can put Wilson or Geno or Cousins in that group if you want to. And you've got a true contender that's offering you a very late first next year, or Bo Nix for one of those quarterbacks. Which one are you taking?
I'm probably taking Nix. That sound,
Right.
Like, after everything I just said, I think that's the answer. I think, yeah, he gives you the upside for this year if he does get the role and it works. And then, yeah, also he has some long-term upside. And I don't love next year's class, especially at the QB position.
I want to just kind of, we'll move towards the opening now. But I want to stay with the Broncos because Marvin Mims, very weird first preseason game. And in terms of snaps with the starters, looks like he's behind not just Cortland Sutton, not just Josh Reynolds, but Tim Patrick. Did you have any thoughts about what happened with Mims, and how do you evaluate the way these coaches use players in the preseason when they don't all have the same motivations?
Yeah, it's really tough. And Mims is, like, honestly the perfect name to bring up because his usage is so strange. He started the game and then didn't play hardly at all, and then came in later in the game and played. If you remember, at the very beginning of the rookie evaluation process, I was very into Troy Franklin. And at this point, and even after the draft, like landing with Nix, I was still tentatively excited. The more that I've just thought about this offense, it's like they bring in Josh Reynolds. They have Tim Patrick back. They've been talking about Tim Patrick all offseason. And honestly, Tim Patrick has been a featured part of the offense anytime he's been healthy. Cortland Sutton's the clear number one. Sean Payton can't stop talking about how much size matters at the wide receiver position for him, and we've seen him have a lot of bigger receivers.
Then why did you draft Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin?
I know. I think that's fair. I think it's possible that he sees them not so much as like every down offensive players, but just like situational players in special teams, and then like coming in and being able to stretch the field in a way that maybe some of these other guys can't. But like, yeah, I think it's going to be an offense that's mostly predicated on short passing and running, and he really values the size and physicality and blocking of these bigger receivers. So to me, my guess is that Mims and Franklin don't matter. I'm not drafting either this year.
Not drafting either this year. Still holding both in Dynasty until mid-season at least.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they each has enough hype and buzz throughout the Dynasty breadcrumb trails that you might be able to find somebody who still believes. They have good analytics. If they ever get a chance to play and do some stuff, then like that might be it. That might be a selling window, or maybe they actually like play and are good because I think both guys are super talented.
Right. Oh yeah. I was a big fan of both, and Sean Payton was like, not only do I not like these guys, I'm going to draft them and bury them so nobody else can use them either. I'm a big fan of Sean Payton right now. Who were some of the guys who moved up for you after week one of the preseason? Some guys that you were happy with either their usage or their performance or both?
A lot of rookies, which is no surprise. We'll see on the injury with Tyron Tracy, but I thought he looked phenomenal. He was the starting running back with Devin Singletary out. Bucky Irving looked really, really good for Tampa Bay. I'm really excited about what Liam Cohen, the new offensive coordinator, might do for their run game. Their first-round center looked phenomenal as a run blocker as well. I think that this has been the worst run game in the NFL, and it might be a lot more efficient. So maybe that's just a good note for Rachaad White if you think he's going to be the every down back. But man, I love the way Bucky Irving runs. Man, he runs with power, he runs with conviction, and he's also really shifty. He's fifth all time. Well, not all time, since 2017, the time that I have the data available, fifth in career avoided tackle rate at the collegiate level. There were some really, really good names for a reason, and that was on full display in the preseason. Ben Sinnott for Washington, and then obviously Jane Daniels looked great as well. But Ben Sinnott, there was some concern that maybe he might be doing more like H-back type of stuff, which that is a whole conversation on its own. Like everybody's excited about that when it's Brock Bowers doing it, but when it's Ben Sinnott, it would be like a death sentence. He wasn't. He was just a traditional tight end. He made some big plays. He looked really good to me. I loved him as a prospect. We'll see when the playing time comes, because Zach Ertz loves to just sit in the way of promising young tight ends. And Cliff Kingsbury does love Zach Ertz, but I loved what I saw from Ben Sinnott. Xavier Worthy with the Chiefs starting offense was out there for the first snap, was used in pre-snap motion each of the first two plays for Kansas City. Hollywood Brown might miss time. I think everything we've seen from Worthy is exciting. Brian Thomas Jr. Was out there for just 7 routes, and I watched him. He looked good to me, man. He was open. He just glides past people. Like he covers ground faster than he should be able to. It looks like unfair. I think he could be a big part of the offense, and I think it might be slow. I don't think there's probably going to be a big target volume. I don't think the offense is going to be necessarily like focused on getting him the ball early on, but if he comes down with enough big plays, I think he's going to get Trevor Lawrence's trust, and he looks like a stud to me. Christian Kirk is the one who came off of the field when the team did go to 2 receiver sets. If you guys remember, that's what happened in the beginning of last year as well. And then Kirk eventually just played his way into a role. But to me, I mean, I think Brian Thomas is probably going to be on the field.
And this is one of those situations where I don't know what matters, because like you've got Gabe Davis, the new guy, and you've got Brian Thomas, the rookie. They know what Christian Kirk is going to do.
Sure.
Isn't it? I mean, and I don't know this. Like, could it just be that they want to see those two guys out there for more reps, and then we get to week 1 and Christian Kirk's playing in 2 wide receiver sets?
Absolutely, it could be. Yeah, I think if that's the case, why even play Kirk? Just give Parker Washington more reps. You know.
I like Parker Washington.
Sure. Yeah. I think he played well last year. I think he's kind of like a mini Kirk. I don't think he's as good on the deep ball, but like, yeah, that would be my thought on it. To me, it looked like they were running what is kind of the plan on offense, and that happened to be Kirk coming out of the field in 2 receiver sets. Keon Coleman for the Bills played every snap with Josh Allen. He was the only Bills player other than James Cook to do that. When the Bills moved Dalton Kincaid to the slot, which they did quite a bit. They would have Kincaid in the slot and Dawson Knox at tight end. Then Khalil Shakir was the one who came off the field for all those plays. So the starting skill position players were Cook, Shakir over Curtis Samuel, Coleman, and the 2 tight ends. But when they went to Kincaid in the slot, it was just 3 plays, but every single time they did, it was Curtis Samuel who stayed on the field on the as a perimeter receiver rather than Shakir. So I just think Brian Thomas and Coleman, the usage was good. I thought of the 2, Thomas looked better, looked more natural. Coleman looked like he had just some nerves. He was slipping a lot.
Right. I've had Worthy and McConkey and Thomas in my rankings kind of just tied together. With Coleman, kind of a gap between those guys and Coleman. Is that still the way that you view it, or do you think Coleman's closer to Thomas than Thomas is to Worthy and McConkey?
That's about the way I've been doing it, and now I'm moving Coleman up closer to them, I think. I think him and Thomas do kind of belong in that same group. You want to talk about hypothetical upside, like we did at the start of the show. Both of those guys fit the bill. Like, the offense could be good. They could score a ton of touchdowns. They could be the guy in win in scoring distance for their offenses, Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr. And I do think it's important that they're staying on the field in these important situations, even though it's just the first week of preseason. Like, Roma Dunze isn't that, you can't say the same for him, like I think that is the case often for young receivers, but the teams seem to have a pretty big role in mind for these guys. And so that's exciting.
I want to go back to the Giants just real quick, the Giants running backs, because assuming it didn't look good for Tyrone Tracy, he went off in an air cast. The Eric Gray came in after him and hit some big runs. He had a lot of success as a rusher in college. On the waiver wire in a lot of dynasty leagues right now. Is that somebody, if waivers are open, that you're looking to add at the next waiver run?
Yeah, I think so. I don't want to think about it, man. I literally saw the news like as I was driving over here to set up and record and hold my microphone. So like, I'm just so freaking bummed about it. Tyrone Tracy is literally my most drafted player, my most rostered player in Dynasty. But yeah, I think if Tracy's out, it's next man up, and it's Gray, and he's looked good in the preseason so far. He can pass protect a little bit. He can do a little bit as a receiver, and he's been a pretty good runner. I think it's just at this point, I don't think he's as much of a threat to Devin Singletary as Tracy might have been, because I think Tracy is truly like an explosive athlete and play creator. So I think Gray is strictly a handcuff. But yeah, if you don't trust that Singletary can handle the workload, then he's interesting.
And we don't have like confirmation that Tracy's got a major injury. We do have a tweet from 1 minute ago from Patricia Traina, who is the Giants writer for Sports Illustrated. He sustained an ankle injury, will undergo additional tests at the hospital for special surgery for a comprehensive evaluation. So we hope he's okay. But again, Eric Gray, probably somebody who needs to be looked at on the waiver wire. Maybe if he's just in that Jahmyr White class, he should still be rostered just about everywhere. Did you have any other positives, or is it time to move to the negatives?
2 non-rookies that I would mention are Calvin Ridley. We saw Treylon Burks play the X receiver almost exclusively with DeAndre Hopkins out. And that is just exciting. That to me signals that the team is really committed to Ridley in this Z flanker role, the Jamar Chase role is what Brian Callahan has dubbed it. You hear that, but you hear a lot of stuff during the offseason, and you don't necessarily know what's actually going to happen until you see it on the field. But we did see it where Ridley was only lined up as the X receiver, where there's like foot on the line of scrimmage where he can get pressed right away. Only one of his routes. They used him in pre-snap motion, got him a target that way. And so it's just exciting to see him used in some creative ways in an offense that's probably going to pass the ball a ton. And I thought he looked good. It was just one catch and 5 routes, but man, he looked a little bit more spry and like explosive than I thought he did last year.
He caught a pass running horizontally to the line of scrimmage. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure if that happened last year in Jacksonville.
He never got a chance.
No, so that was I agree with you. I was very I've been a Ridley guy most of the offseason. I cooled a little bit when there were talks that he didn't quite have the connection with Levis, but that seems to have come around here recently. So I think there's a good chance he's a number 2 wide receiver this year, and he's young enough, and people who had him on their team last year are feeling a little bit burnt. So he is someone that you can go acquire probably cheaper than where I would have him ranked, or maybe even where Jacob would. What was there anything negative you wanted to touch on?
Michael Mayer is the last positive I would mention. I don't know what to make of the Oakland or the Raiders usage because Devontae Adams didn't play, and they were truly like splitting Bowers out wide and stuff like that. I don't know how often they'll do it with Adams in the picture, but regardless, they used a ton of 2 tight end sets, and Mayer actually played quite a bit. I think he played almost 80% of the snaps with the starters. So he might not be somebody that we're forgetting about for Dynasty quite yet. On the negative side of things, really, really brutal run out for Marshawn Lloyd. He is my second most rostered Dynasty running back behind Tyrone Tracy. And yeah, he's just had injuries. It's been a slow start for him because of the injuries. And then he hurt his hamstring in the first game. It sounds like it might not be too severe. He might not miss any regular season time, but it's just so rough for rookies to miss such valuable time early in their career. Trey Benson didn't look very good, but he was running with the second string offensive line, so I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, I didn't move him at all.
Yeah. I think Shakir and Samuel, it's reasonable to move them down. We'll see how this continues to develop, but if they're only playing like half the snaps with the starters, that's going to be really, really hard for them to produce during the season. I'm curious what you think of Kimani Vidal. People seem to think he's going to get cut potentially. Yeah. That might be an overreaction. I think it makes sense to move him down, but at the same time, it's possible he was just like not healthy or was sick or something, right? Like he warmed up and then just didn't play. Same as Ladd McConkey. The
problem is that like nobody who has been around the team has acted like he matters at all.
That's so true.
Like,
yeah.
Like it's just like he's like still 6th or 7th going through all of the drills, and just maybe he didn't suit up because we don't really need to see him.
Sure.
I'm not like I have a lot of leagues, and I actually kind of prefer it this way, where there's not any waivers for a couple of months between the rookie draft and like the next couple of weeks, and then waivers open back up, and there's some guys that have popped up that you want to add, like maybe an Eric Gray. Vidal's not somebody who's moved from like to my drop list already. I want to see where we're at week 1, but I'm feeling pretty pessimistic. I'm feeling pretty pessimistic about the entire Chargers situation. I wouldn't say that there's anybody that's on the Chargers that I feel better about than I did a month ago.
That's fair. I'm still excited for Josh Palmer, but I mean the Herbert injury sucks. The last guy I would mention that I'm worried about is Cole Kmet. Yeah. They started him and Gerald Everett, and Everett played more with the starters. I was already having a tough time projecting Kmet for a fantasy relevant role, just with the 3 receivers and a team that, has a rookie quarterback. We don't know exactly how the pass run rate is going to shake out. I don't know, man. Like he, to me, seems like somebody who might not even be someone you can trust at all. Like might not even be a top 20 tight end this year. And that seems crazy. Like in this crazy league we're about to talk about with it, where you start 2 tight ends, Cole Kmet was like a 4th round pick or something, like he's being drafted in Dynasty. He's probably like a top 14, 15 Dynasty tight end. And I think that makes sense. He's shown us pretty encouraging early career signs, but new offensive coordinator here and a lot of newness in the offense with all the different pieces. So like, I don't know what the role is going to be.
He was drafted in the 5th round of our draft, and 2 picks before I took Dallas Goedert. And let me tell you, I was thrilled to have Dallas Goedert and not Cole Kmet. Even though, like, I think, like, you look at what we think the talent is and the pedigree and the age, and it's hard to not rank him as a top 15 Dynasty tight end. But yeah, it doesn't look very good for this year, and it doesn't seem like he's probably going anywhere. But that was a great transition, Jacob. Let's take a short break. We'll come back. We will talk about this crazy league that Jacob roped me into, and more importantly, like some tight end premium strategy talk, some super flex rankings talk. We'll be back right after this.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
So this league is called Tight End University. Jacob Gibbs started it, seems like about 3 months ago. We are currently in round 7 of the rookie draft. I think Jacob just picked Jonathan Brooks. We've got the draft board up here, but I shared the draft board from Sleeper with Harry, and he did exactly what I asked him to do. And for some reason, Jacob's dumb face is blocking pick 1 and pick 2. And so we'll tell you who's been drafted in those slots. And I want to kind of go over what the rules are of this league. It's not that crazy. 4 points per pass touchdown league. It is a full point per PPR league. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
2, it's a full bonus point for tight ends. You start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 flexes. Is that correct?
Yep.
So obviously Jacob wanted to do something where, like, can we make tight ends really, really important? And as you see, the amount of orange in the first round of this draft, 5 tight ends taken, 5 tight ends taken, 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. So mission accomplished, Jacob. I want to start with the quarterbacks, though, just because it is a 4 point per pass touchdown league, which is different than a standard CBS league. And the first 4 picks in this draft go Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud. My dynasty quarterback rankings are for 6 point per pass touchdown leagues, and mine go Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. What do you think of the order of these first 4 quarterbacks?
I think you, I guess, can justify Hurts at the top because of the format with the 4 point per touchdown. But to me, really, it's Allen and Mahomes are in their own tier at the top of quarterback rankings in any format. Stroud is a huge reach to me. Shout out to my guy EJ. That's one of my best friends.
Good.
Growing up. Yeah, I agree. I would have Lamar higher. But to me, in this format, it's Sam Laporta 101. And the only people you could consider taking over him are Mahomes and Josh Allen. Really, I just made this format so that I could see a draft where Kyle Pitts is a first round pick, and I got it. Pick 12. I'm so happy with this freaking league. It's so ridiculous.
So, and I wanted to jump right into this question. I'm going to, like, Jacob and I made a trade. I think every person who has, the reason the draft's taken so long is because every person who's on the clock gets a trade offer from Jacob. That's one of the other rules. And I received a trade offer at the start of the draft. I had the 6th pick. He had the 11th pick. He offered me his 2nd round pick. So pick 14 in the draft and a 2025 first. For 106 and I think a 2026 third. And you did that after Sam Laporta was gone so that you could take Dalton Kincaid as the 2nd tight end and the 6th player taken in the draft. I ended up taking Jahmyr Chase, 14th overall. I think we both got exactly what we wanted there. But I wonder, what was it? Because I've seen you talk glowingly about Trey McBride all summer long.
I know people are gonna.
What is it that put Kincaid over McBride for you?
People are gonna be calling me a hypocrite. What put Kincaid over McBride for me is that I'm doing this draft with 4 other managers. It's a 5-man operation.
Oh,
and yeah,
you're sharing this team with 4 other people.
It's my brother and 3 of my best friends, and me and my brother have done 10 startups this offseason. No Dalton Kincaid. People are crazy with the places they take Dalton Kincaid, and the same for Brock Bowers, who we took later in the first round. Our strategy was to go up and get 2 elite tight ends. We wanted Sam Laporta. We couldn't get him. Even with trading for your pick, we tried to trade up with Ryan Heath of Fantasy Points, great analyst. He wouldn't budge on Laporta, and it makes sense. I truly think he should be the 101. I went with Kincaid over McBride, even though I'm fully convicted that McBride is a better pick. So if you've heard me talk about McBride all off season, that none of that goes away. I just wanted to get my hands on some Kincaid. And honestly, I'm so psyched about this team because it's so young. You look at this team and it's just like, oh my gosh, we were so right to start this podcast with a conversation about upside, because I've got Dalton Kincaid, Brock Bowers. My running backs are Devon Achane and Jonathan Brooks. It's as much of a just hype train upside team as you could possibly derive. Like, it's completely hype train off of the rails.
Do you have a wide receiver?
Don't have a receiver yet.
No wide receivers through 7.
3 quarterbacks, no receivers.
3 quarterbacks. And I will tell you, you know who else is super excited about you drafting a very young team?
The guy who has my first round pick.
The guy who had the first pick. No, we'll give the first round here. So it went Hurts, Allen, Mahomes, Stroud, Laporta, Kincaid, Jackson, Lamb, McBride, Jefferson, Bowers, and Pitts. And I think we get to the point like maybe right after. Oh, wait, I'll save this for round 3. So Lamb and Jefferson both go ahead of Ja'Marr Chase. Chase is currently my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. So obviously that's why I said we both got what we wanted. I was trying to decide between Lamar and Chase when I was on the clock. How do you just think that like Lamb, Jefferson, Chase is a grab bag and just pick your favorite one? It doesn't really matter.
I actually have Lamb and Jefferson in a tier of their own. I haven't heard Ja'Marr Chase's wide receiver 1 from hardly anybody. That is very interesting. To me, it's like he's the next guy. But yeah, I didn't, because I thought you were kind of low on him for season-long leagues. Am I misremembering here?
I am a little bit low on him for season-long. I'm a little bit low on Jefferson for season-long as well. I don't entirely, like I'm about ready. Jamie made the move a couple days ago to put Tyreek back at wide receiver 1 and drop Lamb a spot. Particularly past this year, like I'm pretty sure that Lamb and Dak are just going to get play for whatever they get paid this year. Are you super confident that CeeDee Lamb is going to be on this team with this coaching staff and this quarterback next year?
Gotcha. So that's what I was wondering, if it was team level stuff with Lamb.
I don't think anybody has more upside than Chase.
Yeah.
Like, the 3 of them have record breaking upside. Mm-hmm. It's just concerns about like Chase and Burrow are going to be together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't have confidence in what's going on in Dallas. I don't think there's any way to. Jerry Jones gives me less and less confidence every time I see him talk. But I'm immensely confident in CeeDee Lamb. That guy has done nothing but improve year over year in a really like wild way, like continues to make huge improvements. And he's still really young. So like, I truly don't know what the ceiling is for him. Jefferson is amazing. And I hope I can make this point in a way that makes any sense. Jefferson, I feel like, has kind of plateaued where like this is the top of the range of outcomes for him because of the types of routes that he runs, because he's running such deep routes. It would be completely unprecedented for his target share to ever push above like 27 or 28%. That doesn't mean that his role could change. Jefferson could be used in a different way with a different quarterback. And so I guess that's a path to more upside for him. But for Lamb, it's like he's used everywhere. He's shown an ability now later in his career to completely dominate press coverage, completely dominate man coverage from the outside as a perimeter receiver. He's insane as a slot receiver. When he was paired up with Kellen Moore, like he was unstoppable in that role, being used in pre-snap motion, all that stuff. To me, like he can do it all. He can win all levels of the field. And because he's not running such deep routes like a Justin Jefferson or a Brandon Ayuk or a Nico Collins or somebody like that, he has the potential to push his target share up into like peak Devontae Adams territory, where it's like he's getting 32% of the targets, 33% of the targets. And to me, that kind of a player, it doesn't matter that much what the team level stuff looks like. Being on Dallas definitely helps. Being on an offense that creates so many pass attempts and has the potential for 30 plus passing touchdowns in a given year definitely helps. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I'm just like so confident in him as a player. I think Jahmyr has the potential to be exactly what I just described, but we haven't really seen it yet. We haven't really seen him do a lot of the short yardage stuff. Like if you look at short yardage targets and who's been the most efficient, it's Tyreek Hill and then Jahmyr, but it's a really small sample size for Jahmyr, so like
and I think that's like one of the places that we look at it differently is I do think that we probably just saw the best year of CeeDee Lamb's career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is great, but if he does this, I mean, if he does continue to improve, like you're right, he has every single year. I want to get to a couple more rounds here because as generally happens when Jacob and I get talking, we start running long and then we don't talk about as many things as we wanted to. Mark Andrews went first in round 2. I took Ja'Marr Chase, then Anthony Richardson. That's another guy I thought should have gone in round 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Travis Kelce, Caleb Williams. I took Joe Burrow in the middle of round 2. So I've got that Burrow-Chase combo, stacking those 2 up. Kittle, Bijan, Jaden Daniels, Hawkinson, and Kyler Murray. I thought the Kelce pick was so interesting because like at that point, you're basically just deciding, you know what, we're going for it. And he might be like, I'm not entirely sure Laporta is going to benefit from this as much as some of the other tight ends, because the targets and catches with all the other weapons they have on that offense, like he was pretty dependent on touchdowns last year to be amongst the elite. Kelsey or McBride, or like Evan Ingram did last year, 111 catches with the double PPR for tight end scoring could really be worth that 101. And you see that the guy who took Travis Kelsey started with CeeDee Lamb, takes Christian McCaffrey with the next pick, takes Jared Goff with the next pick. Like he got the assignment.
Yeah, there's a clear
time
identity.
to go win a championship.
Yeah. Man, this second round is really interesting because to me, I think that the top tight ends are extremely valuable. But after Andrews, there's a big drop off, and you could throw Kelsey, Kittle, Njoku, Hawkinson, Ingram into that kind of, even Jake Ferguson. So for example, like to the point you made, Evan Ingram was the top scoring tight end in this format last year, and he was the 6th or 7th overall scorer in this format. And if you've been like questioning why the tight ends go so high, it's not only that they can score so many points in this format, it's that there have to be 24 tight ends started. And some teams might start 3 tight ends. We were trying desperately to trade up for Ben Sinnott. If Ben Sinnott played a relevant role, we would have been starting him as a flex, and then that just pushes it down where now 25 tight ends are getting started. And so like one team is starting the tight end 25 or the tight end 28 or whatever. Like that is such a huge advantage to have multiple tight ends. But still, to me, it's like after those top 6 or 7, the advantage does kind of get mitigated. And really what I think kind of subconsciously got me going on this whole thing was just like how excited I am about the tight end group that we have coming into the NFL this year. Like this specific group of fantasy tight ends, people have said like there's no, classic like Travis Kelsey, Gronk, Mark Andrews guy where we feel like he's a clear like league winner, like going to score 40 more points than the next tight end or whatever. I sort of agree with that, but I actually do think there's quite a few profiles here who could put that kind of a season up. And what really the most recent way I heard this framed was from Ben Gretsch on a podcast with Matt Harmon, Yahoo Fantasy Podcast. And he said, the top 7 tight end profiles are stronger and deeper than we've ever had in fantasy. And he's like, what are the trends that are going to define 2024 that we don't know yet? And I really think the tight end position could be a big part of that. I think honestly, all these guys are a little bit underdrafted, and especially for dynasty, I think there's some like huge upside with even people like Mark Andrews, who goes completely overlooked in dynasty, I feel like. So I'm just kind of rambling about the tight ends at this point, but yeah, to me, when we get into the second and third tier of tight ends, that's where it's like really kind of a reach in this format.
I will tell you that like it has been kind of a running joke in my columns for most of my career that this is the year that tight end is deep. And so like listening to you talk, I feel like I have fallen down this hole before, and it always sucks. Like we always get to the point to where tight end 8 is scoring 10 fantasy points per game, and tight end 17 is scoring 9 fantasy points per game, and 5 guys matter. That's what I think you're right about like where the guys that are super overrated are. I just think a couple of them might have gone in the first couple of rounds.
Yeah, if it is what we've always seen, where like a few tight ends that we are really excited about don't matter, it's probably going to be the 2 guys that I took, right? Like Dalton Kincaid and Brock Bowers, where their roles aren't quite what we want. I guess you could maybe throw Kyle Pitts into that, just because we haven't like really seen him do it. But yeah, those are the guys with question marks. But to me, it's like Laporta, McBride, and Andrews and Kelsey for redraft. And I guess for dynasty, I don't think he's going away anytime soon. I feel so good about the roles for those guys. And honestly, I'm really confident about the other ones too. I'm curious what you think about Bowers. If you have more about this draft you want to talk about, then that's fine. But like, I don't know what to think of his usage and all of the backfield stuff. To me, it's so I love the people who comment on my stuff on Twitter. Somebody was like, so we're getting excited about Brock Bowers because he's in the Taysom Hill role. And like, truly, that is the exact role that Taysom Hill played in week 1 of the preseason. Like, there's no one more closely compared to what Bowers did than Taysom Hill. And it's like, oh God, like that's such a terrible way to frame it.
I think he has immense upside. I don't really like the hybrid thing. I think it is a negative more often than it's a positive. Specifically for a dynasty draft. And this is not like we kind of already had this conversation, But if I had traded away my first round pick, he would not have been the tight end I would have taken because I don't want to have a good first round pick. I need to go win. I want to go win this year. But no, I think like he is a super wide range of outcomes guy, probably the first 2 years in the league. But if the Raiders figure out the quarterback position, he could be a Kittle, Kelsey, Gronk, like dominate the position for 5 years. And that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I think like in this format, it makes sense. But like I was talking about with the guy who took Lamb and Kelsey, at that point, I know the direction I'm moving. If I'm taking Brock Bowers that early, I'm probably thinking like it's almost like a productive struggle type thing. Let's get to round 3. It was Marvin Harrison Jr. And then I do want to talk about this pick of yours because I need somebody on this show to say some really positive things about Jordan Love's dynasty value. Jordan Love, Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson. I was hoping that Ferguson would fall to me. It might be a little bit of a reach, but I didn't get a tight end until round 5. Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall. Thought the Breece Hall value was fantastic there. I took Justin Herbert, which is the next quarterback taken after you took Jordan Love. Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Njoku, and Trevor Lawrence. So it was Harrison, Love, Ingram, Ferguson, McCaffrey, Hall, Herbert, Wilson, Nacua, Gibbs, Njoku, and Lawrence. I pretty much have Jordan Love in this, and not to say that like where you took him is pretty much in the I don't care range, which one of these guys go, but Love, Purdy, Tua, Lawrence, maybe even Dak, if his contract gets figured out. In Dynasty, that's kind of all one big group to me. Does Jordan Love stand out from that group for you, or he was just the next one rated and you'd have been just as happy with one of the other guys?
He definitely stands out. I have him above that group. To me, have him in basically the same range as Burrow. Like Burrow has done it for longer. We've seen him do it for longer. But if you look at the two, like I think Love has a little bit more rushing upside, and I feel better about his offensive environment. I love Matt LaFleur. I think the coaching there is better. And man, when I watch Jordan Love, like he can make every freaking throw on the football field. I dug into him and watched like 6 or 7 games this offseason and was just like so dang impressed. It was exactly what I remembered. And even in the bad games, like it's like this is stuff that I think will get cleaned up. The coaching is so good. The receiving group is so good and so young. The offensive line is good. I feel so secure about Love. To me, he's really in the same range as Burrow and Caleb Williams. I take him over Jaden, maybe not in this format, but over Jaden Daniels, I would take him over Kyler Murray. Like I was trying to trade up and get him in the second round. Yeah. So why do you have him below all of those guys? Is it just no rushing upside?
Well, I think like when you compare him to Burrow, the big difference for me is I think that there's an astronomical difference between Jamar Chase or even T. Higgins and Jordan Love's wide receivers. I don't think Love's rushing is enough if you're putting up great passing stats to give you a top 5 season. But I kind of think he's going to be just above average when it comes to passing and just above average when it comes to rushing, which is kind of what I expect from Lawrence, which puts him in that like pretty much constantly in the QB 9 to 14 range, which is a good starter. And it's not, I don't think I'm anti Jordan Love, but it sounds like compared to everyone else I am. I think there's some obvious regression coming in terms of the touchdowns last year.
I don't necessarily know. We'll see if Josh Jacobs changes things. But if you look at, and obviously Matt LaFleur has had Aaron Rodgers. So like, right. But if you look at the offenses that he's called, they're super pass heavy in the red zone. And they always create like a league high type of number of touchdowns in terms of percentages that come through the air.
Right. I meant more like the passing a little bit, but also probably not going to have 4 rushing touchdowns on 50 attempts.
Yeah.
But yeah, LaFleur has done that. And so he might be a 30 pass touchdown guy with a couple of rushing on the ground. No, I know that I'm certainly lower, and that's why I meant what I said. I wanted you to kind of make the good case for him so that everybody gets to hear that as well. Now, one thing I didn't say that you did in this startup that I think is important for anybody that's starting a startup, this was a 3rd round reversal draft. So when I was reading round 3, that was coming from pick 12. And that's exactly the way that I would suggest that people do it. Do we have time to read one more round? You think we have time to read one more? I think we have time to read one more round.
I'm
We'll go
good.
through it quick. Again, this was a tight end premium, super flex, full PPR, where you have to start 2 tight ends. So absolutely crazy. I'm talking because I can't. My sleeper's not updating. Do you have the draft results right there in front of you, Jacob?
I can't see the first pick, but I know Pat Freiermuth won this round, and I think he's the only tight end. Pat Freiermuth went ahead of Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Chris Olave. That's rich for me, but at the same time, if you're kind of on that corner and the tight ends are going, you just saw Ferguson, Ingram, and Njoku go in the round before. It's like, I don't know, and so you've got conviction about a guy. I think if you're going to take a shot on a tight end early that isn't one of the elite tight ends, it should be somebody like Freiermuth or Ben Sinnott or Luke Musgrave, who just got drafted recently, where it's like young, athletic, has the size, and it has shown some target drawing ability.
So I do have it now. So we've got Dak as the first pick,
Mhm.
followed by Malik Neighbors, then Pat Freiermuth, then Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. AJ Brown, I was the next pick, probably my favorite pick of the entire draft. I'd much rather have Brown than Neighbors or Tyreek Hill. And I think that Neighbors Hill decision, yet another one that should probably determine your direction for the rest of the startup draft. And then I took Jonathan Taylor in the middle of round 4. Chris Olave went next, then Goff, Tua, Saquon Barkley. You got the other guy I said that was in that tier, Brock Purdy, and Drake London. So let's just take a look at your team through 7 rounds. You've got Love and Purdy and Drake May, who you traded for later, are your quarterbacks. You have Achane and Jonathan Brooks at running back. You have Kincaid and Brock Bowers at tight end. Like you're looking, I think, fantastic.
It's an extremely fun team
for 2025.
Yeah, right.
It's a super fun 2025 team.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think if we can piece together a receiver position and get some late round running backs, we've got a chance. If these 2 tight ends hit, we're going to be at such an advantage over everybody else, because I don't think anybody else has 2 elite tight ends.
No. Now, I'm also this year not sure that you have 2 elite tight ends.
Yeah.
Like Derek has Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson.
That could definitely outscore our 2.
Yeah. That's a pretty good pair. I was trying to see if anybody else took 2 that early, and I really don't think they did. There's a Hawkinson and Njoku, but that doesn't count. My team, and again, I did acquire a 2025 first, so my thought when I did that was, we're probably going to draft for the future. I have Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert at quarterback. I have Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith at wide receiver. I have Dallas Goedert at tight end, and I have Jonathan Taylor at running back. I'm not so sure that I can't contend this year. We're going to find out how much it matters at tight end, because I think the quarterback position I might be pretty good. The wide receiver position, I'm awesome. The running back position, I've already got Jonathan Taylor. Things could be pretty good. How bad of a tight end 1 is Dallas Goedert, and how bad do I have to scrounge for my tight end 2? We'll find out in the coming weeks and months. Jacob Gibbs, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting this draft together.
Yeah, this has been super fun. I hope people like this. Maybe we're inspired, because I think it's just fun to keep coming up with new games, keep coming up with new ways to enjoy football. And that's what Dynasty is all about too. So I hope this league works out. I hope it doesn't just fall apart because it doesn't make any sense, because tight ends are just way too valuable. But yeah, this is fun. Heath, thanks for having me.
I want to thank everybody who was active in the chat, had some great discussion. We'll do a mailbag here before long. We will have Davis Maddock next Tuesday. I want to thank Harry, thank Jacob, and thank everybody who's listening on the stream. We will talk to you next Tuesday.